All right, thanks everyone for joining us. Really excited for the second Baldanders talk and getting to talk to Andrew Ross today about sculpture and, looking totally normal as we do it. Andrew, why did you choose to be Jean Baudrillard today?
Um, well, first off, thank you for being here.
All right,
Thank you, Bam, for inviting me.
of course.
Well, I chose to be Baudrillard because he was very influential on me. I think of post-structuralism as a kind of cultural critique and Baudrillard as the ultimate critic. I I really love when critique turns into a kind of philosophy, like a plot twist in a movie. And that's why every few years, some of the texts that I go back to, one is David Foster Wallace's Consider the Lobster. I love this sort of shift from describing the Maine Lobster Festival to a critique of American consumerism. And then an even more influential text was Andre Bazine's Death Every Afternoon, which is a a film critique, a film critique that is about a bullfighting documentary, and in it, it has the plot twist ever. It ends up becoming a philosophical kind of musing on why it may be unethical to put certain things on film, the death of the bull, and also sex or taboo things, because of ejaculation being in the French le petit mort, the little death. And that kind of problem of lewd things recorded on film is echoed in Baudrillard, especially in his last known essay, which was about the photos from Abu Ghraib, and but also kind of coupled with his conceit that we've become desensitized via the proliferation of images. And my own process as a sculptor, I hope that it reveals plot twists, possibly because I'm quite the process-oriented person. I hope that through the making of something, that I'll turn it over and kind of and critique it and reveal to myself and maybe to others that my intuition that it was worth critiquing was correct.
That's
And
really cool.
why did you choose to be Bam Margera?
Well, when you told me you wanted to be Baudrillard, I felt like you were going to handle metaphysics. And so I started thinking about who can only talk about physics and collisions and physicality. And I said, I think Bam Margera is the perfect person for that. And also, one of the reasons I was really excited to talk to you is you are such a wonderful mind on sculpture. I love when you define things and provide definition for things and the models and theories that you create and generate through sculpture. And so it felt right to try to maybe be incredibly literal and try to like chase you around a little bit as Bam. Felt like maybe capturing some of the plot twists if we can. But going off of that, I really like this thing that you said in the past, which is that you generate theories and then you look for things to kind of justify or provide evidence for theories as you go. And I'm wondering, what are some of the theories that you've been thinking about lately in regards to your practice?
Well, I said that because I'm moving from pieces of content to pieces of content. And I'm partially inspired by Baudrillard in doing that. One of his books that I carry around every once in a while is called Fragments. Every line in Fragments could have been its own book, really.
Yeah.
And that's sort of the point, is like there's all these things to look at, and maybe one of them will be something that I'll turn into something, and others I'll just point out. And we will touch on metaphysics, because what we're really talking about is the difference between an idea and an idea in sculpture. And that's one of the kind of theories or my own fragment that I've been posing to people a lot lately. That it's based off of something a professor once told me a long time ago. She said that sculpture ideas are just figure ground relationships, no matter what you do.
Yeah.
It's always what's in front of what, or what's on top of what, what's breaking what. And then there are ideas. And she didn't really elaborate on ideas. And left me having to figure out what an idea is. And later on in life, I encountered this book, Feedback, Television Against Democracy by David Josselet.
Phenomenal book.
Which begins with talking about visual culture and art history, and visual culture being this sort of macro conversation that is the ground for art history to stand in front of, or that art history could make things that stood outside of and therefore highlight or stood on top of. And we can think of some clear historical examples like the Cubists or the Futurists and their relation to film and photography.
Yeah.
And I've started to think after looking at this that if I had to define ideas to these people that I'm explaining that art ideas and sculpture ideas are really about figure ground relationships, those are those kind of ideas that are for yourself, your opinions, your morals, your political ideologies.
Interesting.
Which you can say to other people or show them with actions, but there's no way to make them turn into objects. There's no direct translation from an idea to an object, which, as somebody who makes things virtually, is extremely clear, because with visual programming, one of the things that you have to deal with quite a bit is categorization. You can't really just plug anything into anything, because you'll get an error. An error that I get a lot, like, for example, is no promotion exists from array to object.
I mean, like, I love the language that like programming comes about, and there's like so much in your answer. Like, also art history is the ground that the work emerges from, or the figure. I mean, we'll hopefully get to like a lot of it, but like some of the ways you're describing like ideas, I wonder if it's like, I was recently talking to the sculptor Tom Friedman, and he was talking about how he's really been interested in the idea of like the inner mind and the way ideas and thoughts are expressed within the inner mind. And he said it was like a type of hearsay, or it's like a type of gossip that happens without language or words. And it had me thinking in relationship to his work, but also your work, this kind of like, what would object hearsay look like? And it makes me think of like, a lot of the sculpture I really enjoy is like, it's not just a singular individual piece, it's like an array, or like it builds a kind of scattered or loose assembly of different things. And maybe it's that form of object hearsay that like someone like Yasue Mitaka or Cecilia Vicuña might fall into that category of a way, or like Rachel Harrison even, of objects kind of having a type of poetic intimacy and relationship to each other that is ultimately abstract and unknowable to us. Something outside of language,
Yeah. So I agree with that. But before, I hope you don't mind if I meander. I want to elaborate first on what I was saying about arrays and objects. In visual programming or in 3D virtual space, there are, everything is a node, and objects are kind of a conglomerate of nodes. There are points, there are locations, there are surfaces, and each of those are nodes, but the object itself is its own node. And so that's where I'm going with that. But I'm really interested And Tom Friedman was definitely a big influence on me as a younger artist. I think a lot of
Same.
people can relate to that because it's very energetic and deals with the grotesque in a way that makes it kind of light and fun. And I really not only just identified with Tom Friedman for that reason, but also because of the way that he deals with scatters, splattered people or,
Yeah.
representations of people. Or I once read an interview with him where he talked about a sculpture that he made where he dropped a set of pickup sticks and then replicated it right next to it so that that kind of random arrangement became contrived. And all these splatter pieces are also contrived in their aesthetic and their color relationships. And, there's a kind of animated logic that's outside of physical logic of splatter with that contrived look. And
I love those pieces.
yeah,
really good.
they're amazing. And to talk about what he said about trying to inhabit a space when you're working on a sculpture where you're working outside of language, I do somewhat agree with that. And the reason why is that language often sets up these logical situations that are, sometimes Freudian. And them being Freudian, means, I'm saying as a shorthand for it, they have a kind of dream logic,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Like, I recently made a sculpture that had a Freudian slip sort of pun in it. It was called a tractor, like a tractor, like tractor, the object, and attracted. And it was actually the idea came to me in a dream. And, I wanted to make the sculpture to kind of test out if it meant that I was attracted to another life, like attracted to the idea of being able to work in nature. And, I think that there's a bit of a debate on dreams and the kind of synchronicity that dreams set up, whether they are, in fact worth investigating, or if they are sort of brain detritus, like being released and therefore meaningless. And I think it's really interesting when you think about that in relation to how we name things now. If you look at objects now, like especially commercial objects, things that are being sold, they're often named with puns or portmanteaus, right?
Yeah.
Like, I recently made 2 sculptures for a show at Thomas Urban Gallery that
Such a
took
good show.
the names of products and reformed them. One was called meter, as in meat, like flesh, and meter, like thermometer, which is also a portmanteau. It just lasted the test of time. But the meter with the flesh is a Bluetooth-enabled meat thermometer that allows you to cook meat to the perfect temperature when you put it in the oven.
So fucking wild.
And
That's cool.
I made
so
it
crazy.
because the sculpture was somewhat like a meter. It was somewhat like a measure of figures. It was a lot about scale. And another sculpture in that show was called Starlink, which was about that Elon Musk company. Well, not about it. It was taken from it, but I used it because the sculpture was about things linking together and they somewhat look like a star. But I'm interested in why these things are named with these literary devices, because when I think commerce names things with literary devices, it's trying to kind of create a feeling of timelessness or meant to be-ness, right? Like the thermometer meant to be, right? Or any other, many others. But then at the same time, when we make a joke, we make a pun. And what does that do? It does quite the opposite. It shows a moment of fleeting synchronicity. And
yeah.
yeah,
Well,
I find that to be a weird divide.
Well, I'm glad you brought up jokes and puns and portmanteaus, and there's a lot there. But like, I think about, um, or it makes me think about the way sculpture really does function as a type of humor, and that it really is time sensitive. And it reminds me, you wrote in a press release, or I think it was you, or it felt like you're writing. You wrote, in the event of sculpture, meaning an entity or group in a certain place and time or involved in a moment that could only happen to them under the circumstances. And what I really liked about that definition of sculpture was that it initiates sculpture into the material sculpture is always time and context. And like a joke, sculpture works for a moment or works for this kind of fleeting ephemeral moment in time, and it works within a certain type of space, whether it's a gallery space or an institutional space, and it can break or not function so easily outside of that time. And I guess I'm just really interested in that way that you very much consider time and maybe like a joke only working for a generation or even for a night and no longer working after that. And the rest of it becomes kind of maintenancing a joke and trying to make it last forever and be a part of art history, which is the absurdity of like what curation and institutional museums are in some ways.